All right, the next podcast you're going to hear is the episode 0 for a student that really enjoys what's going on in the world, current events. So he's going to tell you all about topics and things and give us opinions and kind of give us a news flash. So maybe people that don't necessarily read or newspapers or follow what's going on in the world, maybe this will be a nice opportunity for you to just hear about what's going on. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it along to him.
Every week, I like to talk about current events, but with a twist. For example, although I'll always talk about current events on this show, I like to switch things up every now and then in order to cover these events in very unique, entertaining, and digestible ways, which is how I implement twists into the show. The possibilities are endless. For example, sometimes I'll rank this week's current events, or I'll summarize them while relating them to different topics, and sometimes I may even talk about current events from around the globe. Once again, the ideas I just listed aren't set in stone, nor do they count as an official rotation for this podcast, as I do plan on the show being very experimental. If it wasn't obvious from the title, this is episode 0 of the Daily Dose of Current Events podcast, October 20th, 2023. I'm the main host and only host for today's episode, Aditya. Although this will mainly be a solo podcast, perhaps I'll invite guests over from time to time. As you've heard from my intro, this podcast is a vessel to cover various current events in an easy, digestible way that's both very fun and fresh every time. I plan on making this a 3 to 4 segment show that's fairly short in length each episode, as many people watch podcasts for the sole reason of playing them in the background as they go on about their day, which is why very long podcasts that range from 2 to 3 hours do so well in the podcast market. At least, that's what I've heard from many others on the internet. From the intro, I also mentioned that this is a very experimental and flexible show in terms of its quote-unquote formula, as the ways I'll cover current events are endless. I plan on making my show not revolve around stuff such as politics and things that are school-related, as I know how unentertaining current events become when they're tied to an assignment or have to do with certain subjects. From this more in-depth description of the show, with that said, since my podcast dabbles in current events, it only makes sense that my perspective on them is addressed. After all, I do rely on them heavily in order to make my show work. With that said, my perspective of this topic is that they're only interesting when they're not tied to an assignment, grade, or politics. With all due respect to the people watching that do find politics interesting, I believe that anybody listening who finds my wordy way of speech boring and unnecessary will only become further tired out from having to listen to my yapping about some papers and people who've moved up or down in Congress. Not to mention, hearing some tame controversy about a random thing that people are unsure of getting rid of or keeping is also something I see as boring current event topic. Current events follow that exact same formula. So, in other words, all current events are interesting to me, but politics. I believe this is a fairly straightforward perspective to go about when viewing this topic. And once again, no offense to my politics lovers out there. Moving on, if you'd like to listen to more podcasts or find content as interesting as this one, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Herrick Studios, no spaces, capital H and S. You can find this podcast on your favorite app by searching for Herrick Studios. If you would like to leave us a review, please do so on Apple Podcasts and we might read it on the show. This podcast is a production of Herrick Studios with Mr. Hyden Content Creation Foundation's 8th grade elective. The views and opinions expressed in these recordings do not necessarily reflect the views or position of Herrick School District, and that's going to do it for episode 0. Next time, we'll look forward to ranking all major current events in 2023. That's going to do it for me, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.